The grocery store was packed and tensions were high, but no one expected what happened next. A woman, let's call her Karen, stood in line, frustrated and impatient. When she saw another woman, a black shopper, step ahead, she didn't ask questions. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a can of pepper spray, and unleashed it right in the woman's face. Gasps filled the store as people rushed to help, but Karen stood firm, convinced she was in the right. But karma works fast. Just 3 minutes later, as store security stepped in, Karen found herself facing someone she never expected. The woman she attacked wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and revealed her identity. She wasn't just any shopper, she was a judge. And Karen? Well, she was about to learn a lesson she'd never forget. Stay tuned, because this twist is one for the books. The store fell silent as the reality of the situation sank in. Karen's confidence wavered as she took a step back, her face turning pale. The woman she had just attacked wasn't just another shopper. She was Judge Olivia Carter, a well-respected figure in the community. Still blinking through the pain, Olivia straightened her posture, her presence commanding the room. The security guard, now realizing who she was, immediately turned to Karen. People whispered, some pulling out their phones, capturing the scene as Karen's expression shifted from smug to stunned. I didn't know, she stammered, glancing around as if looking for a way out. But there was nowhere to go. Store management had already called the police, and now Karen was trapped in a situation she never saw coming. Judge Carter took a slow breath, her eyes locked on Karen. So, she said, her voice steady but firm, what was that about cutting in line? Karen shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between the judge and the growing crowd. The weight of the situation pressed in on her, and for the first time, she felt small. The loud murmurs from bystanders didn't help. Some were outraged, some were curious, but most were in shock. How had it come to this? A simple disagreement over cutting in line had spiraled into something far more serious. Olivia didn't flinch. She had seen many people come before her in court, some with far more serious offenses, but this was personal. She had spent years building her reputation as a fair and just judge, and now she had to figure out how to handle this without making it feel like a personal vendetta. It wasn't just about her. It was about the message this incident would send. If she let Karen off too easily, people might think there were no consequences for bad behavior. But if she overreacted, she could lose her credibility as a judge. As Karen fumbled for an excuse, trying to explain that it was all a mistake, Olivia's mind raced. Was this just an isolated act of aggression, or was it part of something bigger? Had Karen been targeting her specifically because of her race, or was this just a case of pure frustration? And then there was the thought that lingered. Would Karen's actions be excused because of her position or wealth? Olivia could sense Karen's desperation, but it didn't excuse what had just happened. The whole store was watching now, and Olivia knew that whatever happened next could set a dangerous precedent. Everyone was waiting for her next move. The air in the store felt thick with tension as Karen's voice quivered, trying to backtrack. I didn't mean to. It's just I was in a rush, and it looked like you. Her words trailed off, faltering under Olivia's icy stare. The judge's silence was heavy, and each second that passed seemed to stretch longer. The crowd was growing, murmurs now louder, as more people started to crowd around, sensing the impending fallout. Olivia stood still, her calm demeanor belying the storm brewing inside her. She had been in charge of courtrooms filled with tension, but this was different. This wasn't a case where the law could be neatly applied and dismissed. This was personal, and she felt the weight of every person in the store, their eyes on her, judging her every reaction. Karen took a step forward, eyes wide, desperation creeping into her voice. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. It was just a mistake, I swear. Her words were hollow, the truth tangled with panic. But it was clear now that this wasn't just a random outburst. Karen's behavior felt intentional. Whether it was the frustration of the day or something deeper, Olivia couldn't tell. The crowd was growing restless, some people recording the entire scene. The longer Olivia stood there without saying a word, the more the tension grew. It was as if the store was holding its breath, waiting for her to decide the fate of this moment, the fate of Karen. Was this just a simple act of a woman overwhelmed by the stresses of life? Or was this part of something darker, more calculated? Olivia couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that Karen wasn't sorry at all. She was just trying to save herself from the consequences she knew were coming. Karen's face was red, her voice pleading now, barely audible over the hum of the onlookers. Olivia took a step closer, her presence commanding, and the room went deathly silent. Everyone waited, knowing that what happened next would change everything. Would Olivia make her stand? Would she show mercy? Or was this just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them had imagined? Just as the silence seemed unbearable, a voice broke through the tension. "Is everything okay here?" The new voice was calm but firm. Olivia turned, surprised to see another figure entering the scene, a man in a well-tailored suit, clearly someone of importance, and someone Karen immediately seemed to recognize. The man approached with an air of authority, his presence suddenly shifting the entire dynamic. Karen's face shifted from panic to something closer to relief. "James," she muttered under her breath, a mix of gratitude and something else in her eyes. "I didn't know what else to do. She attacked me." James, with his smooth, calculated demeanor, stepped forward, his gaze briefly meeting Olivia's before he turned back to Karen. "I'll handle this, don't worry," he said with a confident smile, as though this was all just a minor inconvenience. Olivia's heart sank. She had seen men like James before, the kind who use their status and influence to manipulate situations in their favor. He was clearly more than just a bystander. He was someone connected, someone who could make things go away with the right kind of power. But it wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about something bigger. How far this woman's privilege could stretch, and whether Olivia would let it slide. Olivia's instincts kicked in, but her mind raced. Was James here to cover up for Karen, or was there more at play? Her reputation, her position as a judge, had always been about fairness and justice. Yet, the presence of this man was a game changer. The stakes had risen. Now, it wasn't just about one person's bad decision. It was about power, corruption, and the lengths people would go to in order to avoid the consequences of their actions. The room was holding its breath again, and this time the question wasn't just how Olivia would handle Karen. It was how far she was willing to go to expose the truth. The air felt heavy, the tension thickening as James stepped closer to Karen, his presence intimidating. Olivia could feel the shift, her stomach knotting as she realized what was happening. James was here to clean up the mess, using his power to sweep this under the rug. But Olivia wasn't about to let that happen. With a deep breath, she met his gaze head-on, her voice steady despite the swirl of emotions. "I'm afraid it's too late for that," she said, her tone colder than she intended, but it felt right. "This isn't something you can fix with your connections." James paused for a moment, clearly surprised by her response. He glanced at Karen, who was now looking more anxious than ever. It was clear now, he wasn't used to being challenged. And Karen, she was frozen, her earlier defiance now replaced with an unsettling realization that she couldn't escape the consequences. But just as James opened his mouth to speak, a new voice cut through the chaos. "I think you're both forgetting something important." All eyes turned as a woman stepped forward from the crowd. It was the store manager, who had been watching quietly until now. "I've been recording everything from the moment this started," she said, her phone raised. "I'll be sending the footage to the authorities. You can't cover this up." For a split second, Karen's face fell, panic setting in. James' confident facade cracked, and Olivia could see the shift in his expression. The last thread of their carefully constructed narrative unraveled in that instant. The power they thought they had was slipping through their fingers, and the truth was now exposed for everyone to see. The crowd murmured, some whispering about the store manager's courage, others still in disbelief. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, but she knew the right thing had been done. Then, just when it seemed the situation was about to resolve, a final twist caught them all off guard. As Karen turned to leave, a man stepped forward, his face ashen with recognition. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice trembling. He glanced nervously at Karen and then at Olivia, confusion turning to shock. "I'm sorry," the man said, almost too quietly to hear. "But Karen, she's my sister. And I think you should all know something else." The room fell silent again as the man revealed a chilling truth. The connection between Karen and James wasn't just one of privilege.